Laura Wasser. I've heard your name so many times. I used to live in LA, and you definitely, which is unusual, have a brand in representing clients in divorce. I mean, there are other people that specialize in different things, and we hear certain names and headlines, but you're kind of the go-to person for many people. Would that be accurate?
Okay.
Okay. So I don't know. Do you know anything about my divorce, even peripherally, headlines, or just
I just know that it wasn't fun and it probably went on longer than it should have.
right? So I had a 10-year divorce. I had the same lawyers the whole time, which is something we can get into, lawyers and the misconceptions, in my opinion, about choosing lawyers and what types to choose. And so I had the same two lawyers the whole time, Al Majewski, and at the time Ronnie Schindel worked for him, and this woman Heidi under them. So, and the reason I wanted to have you on, because you're an expert, you're a bona fide expert in this, obviously. I am not, but I consider myself an expert based on Alan and Ronnie telling me that they've never seen a case like this ever, with the many things that happened that are unprecedented for them. And they said that it has, affected some case law and the way things are done. This, I try to say humbly, they say that they've never had someone on the stand like me that wasn't an expert, because I really do believe that, just like a Hollywood agent or any lawyer, you're only as good as your client. And somehow, either intrinsically or because of how I am in business, along the way, I realized that without me and the information and being organized, that you can't succeed. So first, I just wanted to hear what you have to say about that concept, like a lawyer being only as good as their client. Clients expect their lawyers to just be majestically solving problems and dealing with things, when they do have other clients and they understand the cadence of the legal system.
So on that, what I'll say is many, many lawyer switches, not for you. That's a red flag. That's a red flag for the new lawyer coming in and for a judicial officer. So when they see, okay, this person has been with the same lawyer for the entire time, but this person is on their sixth lawyer, right away, that sends a message to anybody that's involved in the matrimonial law community. Could be civil as well, but really for us, that's like, okay, what's the problem with this client? And then the next thing is, yes, to a certain extent, you're only as good as your client. But we, as family law practitioners, know that, remember, we don't do our cases in front of juries. We do them in front of judicial officers. So it's usually somebody who understands the law already, hopefully, and now also has a pretty good sense of what they're watching when it comes to credibility, when it comes to organization. So it is incumbent upon us to prepare our clients so that they can be good witnesses. Our job is kind of to create a narrative, tell a story, and then as our client is on the stand, through direct examination and then eventually in cross, really show that that person is credible and that our narrative is the one that the judge should believe and make decisions based on that. So yes, if you were an amazing witness, that is very, very substantial in how the case will go down for your side.
Well, that's also in the event that something goes to trial, which most don't. Most people are sort of in this limbo before. And there's a couple of things that I wanted to get into with that. So, and it's kind of me giving you what my opinion is, and then you could tell me what, you clarify, or like you just did, expand upon. So what I've told this audience, and it is my opinion from what I've heard. So people want to go and they want to play games. They want to go and they want to interview every single divorce lawyer so the other person can't, lock them up. And it's been my experience that you do not want to play tennis with a shitty tennis player. So a lawyer does not want to be against some monkey. So there are no lawyers left. Then they're with some monkey who does sideshows and is a cowboy and does all these things. And then things end up being, messy. And I find that people often want to create these shortcuts based on bullshit they've seen in movies or hear from other people, but that this process needs to be some version of a follow the rules and some sense of order process. And that in many cases, even with quote unquote successful or good lawyers, there's a conservative type of straight and narrow lawyer that, has some version of a code and is going to give you, based on their institutional knowledge, a roadmap that obviously can change, that they can see unforeseen things, which happened to my lawyers 10 times. But even within that, They're not trying to play games. And then there are these expensive, quote unquote, successful, often in headline lawyers that are what I call cowboys. And they want to come in and they wear the pinstripe suits and they want their clients to think, oh my God, because they're like a name brand. You think you're going into Hermes and or Chanel, and it's going to be markedly different in the fact that it's a handbag holding your items. And it's still another lawyer, it's another human, and this person cannot create magic despite them flashy cashing you. And a lot of people go for the low hanging, flashy cashy cowboy fruit, or want to make it that the other person has a bad lawyer and they have this like sort of hot shot. And I believe that that should be dispelled because that's doing yourself a disservice. That's my opinion.
I agree with that opinion. I think, I mean, think about it like this. When you're going through a divorce, you're going through what is a legal proceeding. And like you said, it's prohibitively expensive to get to trial. So usually there's going to be a couple little skirmishes, if at all. But for the most part, it's some letter writing. Maybe it's a settlement conference or a mediation. And maybe you get in for one or two motions before any kind of a massive trial that would be had. And then usually it does resolve. In terms of what kind of a lawyer you get, I mean, I think the people that are listening to this really need to think about, do you want the flash or do you want someone who's really going to tell it to you like it is, figure out what the law is and how to apply the facts in your situation to that law? Unlike almost any other kind of lawsuit, a divorce, or if it's a parentage action that people have lived together and been, had a kid, but they're not married, which we're getting a lot more of these days. And I think that's good. If you don't need to get married and you have kids, so be it. But if you're dealing with something that's so personal and where the money is not going to come from some third party, you slip and fall in a grocery store and you sue whatever the chain of grocery stores is, or if you get into a fender bender and you've hit somebody and they're going to have to pay through the insurance. This is you. This is your money that you have with your spouse for your family. And the more of that's going out to lawyers and forensic accountants and private judges and custody evaluators is money that you don't get to keep for you, your spouse, and your kids. So that's something I think people really need to think about when they're getting into it. If I'm going for flashy cashy or whatever you're calling it, I'm spending money on somebody that has no interest in what I'm going to be doing in my next step. My spouse and I got into this marriage together. We had children together. Maybe we had homes or companies or whatever it is. And now all of a sudden, all of our money is going out to other people. How do we keep as much of it as we can intact? One way is as for you as the party to get as educated as you can about the law in your state. What is the law? Am I in an equitable distribution state like New York or a community property state like California? It's not terribly complicated. And if you can then say to your lawyer, okay, so now I understand the law. Can you explain to me a couple of permutations in it? How are we going to get this resolved? Isn't that the best way to move forward? And I say to people so often, we can do this the easy way or we can do this the hard way. But the easy way is going to save you a lot of time and aggravation, the emotional and financial expense that you will save by settling this case and working with somebody, hopefully on the other side, who's rational, makes much more sense to most people. And in fact,
Yes.
what we've started now is an online divorce company called divorce.com, where people can go online. They can actually find the law in their state. They can educate themselves and online without lawyers go through a mediation and resolve things. Now, that probably
Yeah.
wouldn't have been the case for you, but it's certainly the case for a lot of people out there that they
It's
can do
certainly the
that.
case for a lot of people, and this will help them to realize that. And, the thing is that I think that if you cannot have the tail wagging the dog, and in many cases, the client. And the thing is, the other misconception is that for some reason people hold divorce and family law attorneys to a different standard. They feel, there's just blanket statement. Oh, the lawyers are the only ones who win. They all want, the money. And it's like saying that every single dog is the same. Every single man is the same. And I'm the only person who spent millions and millions of dollars and really likes my divorce attorneys and realized that they were unnecessary, respectfully evil. Like they don't, because not all, yes, some want to make money, some want to rack up hours, but they are immensely important and not controlling the legal system. And the legal system is these judges that are not making a tremendous amount of money and that all they have is caseload and paperwork. And I think that so many people blanket statement things like they're just all about the money when clients are then going to these lawyers and they're telling them every single thing that they think is important. The minutia doesn't matter, sadly. Like many clients want to call their lawyers and tell them every single story that happened. And it could be a sad story. Someone told you to go fuck yourself. Someone said you're a piece of shit. You're ugly. Like, that's terrible. That person could be an asshole, but it doesn't mean you should be racking up money with your lawyer. You got to control yourself. You got to pick your spots. You got to cooler minds prevail, because people don't connect the fact that judges have all of these cases, some people putting lit cigarettes out on their kids. And so where you are on the spectrum of thinking that your lawyer or your lawyer allowing you to think that they're just going to call the judge every time you have a gripe is something that is how the bills get racked up. A client has to control themselves.
And also use the right professional. I say to people so often, like, at my hourly rate, you don't want to tell me your issue with the new guy you're seeing and should you bring him around your kids and your ex got upset. That's a therapist. You got therapists, you got parenting counselors.
Friends.
If you've got accounting issues, go to your business manager, your accountant. At my hourly rate, I can assure you, you don't want to be asking me these questions. I'm not qualified to answer them, and it doesn't make sense. And yes, like you said, pick your battles, pick what stories are important. And in terms of then saying to your lawyer, oh, but you need to write a letter about this. Those letters cost a lot of money. And what I also say to clients all the time is more conflict equals more attorney's fees. We can't charge you these exorbitant bills if you're not arguing, or if you're not asking us to write a letter about that vase or that, book or whatever.
Exactly.
You can work these things out yourself. And if you can, you ought to, because we can't do the overcharging evil lawyer thing if you don't give us the ammunition.
Now let's talk about the gray area, because there are gray area. Most of this is gray. Most of the areas are gray and nuanced, where a lawyer cannot, by any stretch of the imagination, feel and understand what's really going on. And because there are so many boys who cried wolf, it's hard. And these are the women who come to me, these people that are in these gray area situations where, like, they're telling this story, and I understand this story better than most because I've been in the gray for a while, until I had enough binders, tabs, threads, a disproportionate volume of emails in order to create these patterns for people to realize, oh, wow, this is very different in many different areas. You cannot move out, because that means that you are abandoning, the residence.
Right.
You're in the marital residence and you're not supposed to move out, because that's seen as abandonment. Or you cannot buy something because you're in the middle of a financial trial, and if you go buy something, then that's seen as either not withholding funds, but like you don't have a resolution financially yet, and you're not supposed to do that. Or you shouldn't be doing this right now in your physical custody situation, because then it will look like it's really something that you're trying to gain financially. These are specific but also vague, meaning everybody's got their own version of this.
Right.
But there are times as the client, you have to break these rules because you are seeing what's going on and you have to take some risks, just like in business. There have been situations in my experience where moving out despite lawyers recommending otherwise, and doing things that were advised against based on traditional family law were applauded, because you have living, breathing organisms. You have children, you have life, you have mental wellness, like things like that. So I want to discuss that gray, because those are areas where you as a lawyer are not going to go half cocked and just tell someone to do whatever they want. You're saying what is traditionally done, but the only way that laws move and get changed are by extenuating circumstances. So I kind of wanted to talk about that gray and where a person needs to make their own decisions with some cautionary risks.
Right. Well, again, especially when it comes to kids and safety and being a parent, you have to do what you know is going to be best for your kids. We as lawyers can advise you on the law, how to apply the law to your facts, but ultimately, if there's a situation that's going on in your home and you got to get out of there, you have to do it. One kind of rule to live by in family law is reasonableness. If you are doing what is reasonable under the circumstances, reasonable to you as you see things as a parent, as a homeowner, as a business owner, then I think a judicial officer is generally going to take that into consideration and say, although the general rule is X, we understand there are extenuating circumstances and it was reasonable for this party to take the action that he or she took because of what was going on at the time. So you really have to think about what's reasonable. And yes, sometimes what we call self-help, which is when you're kind of doing things unilaterally and not asking the court for permission or even the lawyers to have an agreement about something, is because it's absolutely necessary at that time. And if you have a reasonable justification for it, usually the law, meaning the judicial officer who might ultimately will hear it, is going to say, I get that. That makes sense to me. There's no hard, fast, black, white rules in family law because there's so many emotions.
But that's like anything else. If you're a child that never misbehaves, you never do anything wrong, and one day you go do something, you stay out late, you have fun, your parents are not going to go crazy in the same way as if you are doing this every day and it seems like you're lying. And that's what people don't understand about judges too. They're human beings and they're judging and assessing a situation. So if this one person, and of course everybody, if I had a dollar for every person who said to me, "Oh, I have the worst judge. They favor my, ex, etc." And I just roll my eyes every single time because I don't believe in that. I really don't. I mean, listen, judges are human beings. There can be, I'm sure, a jerk. There could be a nice person. There is 50 shades of gray. But it's my opinion that if you're this pain in the ass, whatever, what do you call it? The two people, the defendant, the two
Plaintiff and defendant. Yeah.
Right. If you're a pain in the ass party that's going in there crying wolf every time, and then you come in and you've got this other big thing that you did, this big sweeping move, I think it will be judged differently. And it's back to how people think this is some different universe where it's not. If you have a situation with, you're going in front of a judge at two businesses, it's a similar situation. I just think people often just want to do these sweeping statements. So my opinion is you can use your best judgment, but your judgment is going to be judged on the rest of your judgment in this situation in front of this judge.
Right. Also, keep in mind, I don't know if this happens in New York State, but my understanding is it does. Certainly here in California, and particularly here in Los Angeles, we have judges. It's like a revolving door. When I first started practicing 30 years ago, it had been the same, like 20 guys on the bench forever, or whatever. But now they're serving their little stint in family law and moving on to greener pastures. And we have a situation where you could go in April, sit in front of a judge, explain your story. He or she reads the whole thing.
Wow.
And then you go back in June and it's a whole different judge. So, and they don't have a lot of time. They got to get up to speed. They don't really know. Nightmare. They don't really care. Yeah.
No, that's a nightmare. And that's a nuance because there's a tone, and you're right. There's like history that judge might, because like I said, they're not a computer. There's no way they don't have a feeling, a thought, an observation. So that's extremely frustrating. But we had a situation like that as well. Interesting. 20% of my lifetime was spent on a divorce on a 2-year marriage.
Right. And not just extensive, but expensive. I mean, most people don't have the means to be able to keep doing that. I'm sure you would say, I don't have the means either. I just got sucked in and I couldn't. And of course, when it has to do with your kid, you'll spend every last dollar on it, but it is absolutely crazy. And I don't know enough about your case specifically. I do put a lot at the feet of judges. I have a case that I've been in right now, and it's a retired judge, so we find dates when we can to be in front of her to have the case tried. But the fact that we are still in it, and the fact that it's gone on for so long, and that it affects so many different things, not just finances, but in this family's life and in the children's life, at a certain point, as a judge, I believe what you need to do is say, we're done. We're not doing this anymore. You cannot come back again. You cannot change it.
No, that's interesting because I'm not disagreeing with you, but in my circumstance, I disagree only because if somebody keeps opening up another Russian doll, there's no choice but to keep going back. And it has nothing to do, in my situation with a judge, it has to do with just new jack in the boxes.
And that's really unfortunate that it's that way. Again, most people cannot afford to have that kind of safety around them, which is also really scary.
Exactly. And the money, funny because you brought up the money, which is what most people think about. The money is the least of, it was the emotional trauma. And a lot of people going through this, when they don't have the money or the lawyer or the judge, like they're just in the gray. Meaning until even there's a temporary schedule for people, a temporary financial, it can be very gray. And that's where people can play mind games. And it's not limited to people. This is a one area where really the person who has the money can have more power because of being able to stay longer in the case. But often the person without the money can create a lot of disruption. And
because they feel like they have nothing to lose. That's another problem.
Thank you. And they also, this is a place, they have nothing to lose. and they can be a jihadist, and this is where they can exert power.
Right. True.
Okay, so one of the things that I do believe is that when I say first of all, we've seen this in celebrity divorces, some that you've been involved in, so I won't bring up the names, but I feel like many people, whether famous or even in their communities, they want to play to the court of public opinion instead of the court of the law. And I think that that gap is not bridged. Like, want to tell everybody in town everything going on and really want to like garner and listen to their own story. And they then lose sight of the court of law, which is very different than the court of public opinion.
This is true. And again, when you have a person who is a public figure, they also have to worry about what is, rather than them putting the story out, they have to worry about what's being said about them and how it might affect their future. So if you're in a custody battle and you've been accused of domestic violence, then you need to put that out. Either defend yourself and make it clear that didn't happen, or snuff it out, the false accusations, before anything happens, because that could now affect the rest of your career. No one's hiring an abuser. And so that becomes a problem. You've been canceled. Oh my God, how am I going to pay child and spousal support when this person has accused me of domestic violence, whether it's right or wrong? Now we have a problem. And I say to people all the time, look, you're the goose that lays the golden egg. You need to not engage. If you're a celebrity, then you generally have a publicist. And so when they call me initially, I will say, let's lay low. Let's kind of take social media down for a little while. Let's do any kind of PR that's done be simply about whatever movie or TV show is coming out. Let's not talk about any family stuff. Let's not post stuff. To shut things down and say less is more is much better for these folks, because having the public following your every move in terms of a divorce or breakup can be very, very difficult. It also gives the person who's not as famous a great deal of power in terms of, we've had full-on blackmail extortions of, I'm going to say this if you don't pay me this. Yes. That's horrible. It should never be that way. But again, it's something that when you become a famous person, you have to realize may go on. And so there is a different way of dealing with those kind of celebrity divorces and trying to, again, keep the narrative. You guys are a little luckier in New York because you can seal things more easily. We can't really seal anything in California, so that makes it tough. Also, you can file divorce actions without putting the people's names. The minute we file a divorce action in California, every TMZ is all over it. So we have to be very careful about that, and sometimes wait until the very back end to file anything so that we're not having to be under the microscope of not only a judge and the other side, but the entire public.
I think this also applies to the average person, because what I've realized, and a lot of the people that listen here and that are like, were crying when I took down the first 3 because I was dealing with a personal death and I just needed to not, like, I've never ever had an influx ever since we started this podcast, since I started this conversation, because of what I personally went through. It made it more tangible. In every area of this, less is more. And I mean, let's say you're dealing with a contentious person who, like, to the analogy of you, is threatening or taunting or abusing. I feel like you have to not have matches in your hands at any times. No matter what is said to you, you can't react. A therapist said to me, wait 6 hours before responding to an email. And you can take this all the way down to not responding to emails, having somebody else read and vet the emails. You can take this down to blocking and not allow correspondence. There's a lot you can do without having to ever correspond with someone. And people would be shocked by that. You can completely co-parent without ever saying a word or ever hearing the voice of another person your whole life. And I think that's a hard concept, because I've seen firsthand people continuing to interact because they're nervous about it seeming like they're not being a responsive parent. Right. When there are 1,000 ways that you can do that. But I found that the first step is to cooler minds prevail. And I also have found that fewer words, like no extra information, no color, no, well, that's disgusting. Well, you shouldn't have, literally like you're writing The cat
Yes.
went up
See you
the
at
tree.
7. Right. Just,
Yeah,
yes,
like
exactly.
no extra, zero extra information, no frosting, no filler, just the words. And I've said this even to assistants who have had to know my schedule and no extra, no like, hey, and we're sorry to say, but it's like, no, none of that. It's called this will be happening. This will not. No extra, no unfortunately's, no commas. Like, I feel that less is more across the board, to your point. And for celebrities and non celebrities, you want to get everything out right away. Like, get it out. Like, you're never getting the last word. You're never getting it all out. You've got to calm down and keep your shit together because it's a marathon. It is not a sprint. It is like, I thought of it as holes of golf. You could think you're at the 17th hole, but you're really for 1 minute at the 17th hole and then you get kicked back to the 10th. You don't know
Right.
where you are in the process until you're out.
Yep. I think that's true. And I feel like I think particularly over the past 10 years or so with conscious uncoupling and, gentle separation and all that, that's great. That's great if you can do it. It is a great way to raise kids. I totally agree. However, there is an entirely different school of thought that deals with the folks that are unable, for whatever reason, to peacefully co-parent. And that's called parallel parenting. We're both doing our thing. We're giving you the absolute basics that you need through some kind of portal, whether it's our family wizard or whatever it is. Again, divorce.com has these portals. You can share the information as you're required to under law, but nothing else. Parallel parenting, we'll each do our own thing. They even have their own parent teacher conferences, and that's okay.
Exactly.
If that's the way it works, that's okay too. You're not Gwyneth
That's
and Chris, but it's okay.
That's a great point because I've brought up before, you have to become a solution based person. You have to become a person that doesn't start sobbing because you don't get Christmas, which is a day of the year, respectfully to Christmas, respectfully to Hanukkah. It's no longer the same. So you decided because you looked at your calendar that the 23rd is Christmas this year. It's Christmas. Your 2-year-old doesn't know the difference. Santa's coming. There's a Christmas tree. You lean in. Thanksgiving is Tuesday night. You get your friends to come over. You cook. You get the turkey. You have to be really organized and proactive instead of whining about what cannot happen.
True.
And okay, so how stupid on a 1 to 10 is somebody of any socioeconomic status whatsoever to not have a prenuptial of some sort?
Oh, I don't think you need them in every situation. I think what's more important than actually having a prenuptial agreement is having the conversations which might lead to one. Again, a prenuptial agreement can address certain things, how you're going to treat the money that you earn or the things that you create during your marriage. It can pertain to what happens after in terms of spousal support. You can't really include child support or child custody in a prenuptial agreement. So you could still have
Right.
those issues upon divorce, even if you had one. What I
True.
think is important and what I think a lot of people don't consider as they're moving towards their wedding day and they're signing up for the venue and for the band and for the florist and for the cake and the person that makes their dress and where they rent the tuxedos and whatever else is when you get married, you are entering into a contract. Okay. Just like the contract that you
I say
have
this all the
with the
time.
venue.
Yep.
And if you don't know what the terms of that contract are, which is the law in your state, then you're an idiot because really people say, oh, it's so unromantic to have a prenuptial agreement. Why is it unromantic to have a prenuptial agreement if what you're doing anyway is entering into a contract? Do you like the terms
But
of your
that's why
contract?
it is. That's why it's a 10 on a scale of stupid because you
Not
don't go
necessarily
into the.
because you may not
Why?
care that you may be fine with the law. I'm fine. I'm getting married. We both just got out of law school and whatever either one of us earns in California is going to be community
Oh,
property.
you're saying, okay, but you're saying, yes, whatever. Okay, so whatever we earn in California is, but that's basically saying we understand the contract and that is a
Correct.
contract in and of itself. You're saying, hold on, we got to clear this up because you're saying if you walk in California into the courtroom, you understand the rules. Like, in other words, you make a dinner reservation, they have a cancellation policy, you're getting charged $200. You already know that as you make the reservation. So you're saying you meet someone and in that state, you know what happens if you don't have a prenup. So you are signing a contract anyway by legally getting married. And in that particular state, but in another state, it may be more gray. And in that state, you maybe should absolutely have a prenup because it's too gray to understand.
It's never too gray to understand. You need to understand it. And if you don't like it, maybe now at my age, after practicing law for 30 years, if I get married, I don't want all of my money to be community property. I want my money to stay my money and his money can be his money. So I say, here's the law. now we're going to do a different set of laws for us. That's the prenup. So what I'm saying
That's
is
okay.
wherever you are on a scale of 1 to 10, here's where you and I will agree. The 10 is if you don't know what the terms are of the contract you're entering into. If you know what they are and you're cool with them, fine. If you're
That's
not cool with
fine.
them, then you need a prenup.
That's then we're saying the same thing. You need to understand the cancellation policy and what it is, but most people just don't like the concept. I know people making a lot of money, went to major schools, very successful, getting married, and this isn't really the point, but I'm going to say it anyway. They're going to be the more moneyed spouse, and they're goo goo gaga and militant about the dress and militant about the flowers and the venue and the marketing and the magazines and all of these things. And all of a sudden, everybody becomes goo goo gaga dum dum when it comes to a contract. And here's the thing, I'm a business person. I would not invest in most businesses that had a 60% chance of failing. That's not really how I roll. So now you're going into a situation and it's all because marketing and everyone's being marketed. And thankfully to a place like divorce.com, sadly, to promote marketing, the fact that divorce is true too. I just, people become all of a sudden, they don't want to fill up their big girl or big boy panties when it comes to something that is, it is a deal. You are making a deal. You have a partner. And if your partner fails and shirks its responsibilities in this business of marriage, what are you going to do? Can you get them out? Can you get out of the contract? Like, no one makes that connection, and it's very frustrating.
And like I said, even if you don't have one, there's other things that people don't discuss because, as you said, they're goo goo gaga. How about things like, how are we going to raise our kids? I'm Jewish, you're Catholic. Are we going to send them to parochial school? Or my parents are older and I don't ever want to put them in assisted living. Are you okay if they come live with us after a certain age and we do
A
that? Or is
hundred
that something
percent.
you'd never? Those conversations are not fun conversations to have. They're not sexy, and they're certainly not as much of a good time as going to your cake tasting or looking at different flowers for the centerpieces, but they must be discussed. And the people that do have those uncomfortable conversations are the ones that tend to stay married longer.
Well, The Bachelor is why I talk about it being irresponsible. You could take two people from a middle class background, put them into the hills of Thailand eating $2,000 caviar. Everybody's sexy. Everybody looks good. Everyone's got hair and makeup dresses. They're making out. They're in fantasy suites, which is literally a fantasy. And then they're going to go or even make people at home think they're going to come home and be in a romance when we didn't do therapy on that show. We didn't talk about money. We didn't talk about religion. We didn't talk about dogs, cats. We didn't talk about politics. Nothing that is actually we didn't talk about sex. What's the expectation? Nothing that will actually come up. But the caveat to what you're saying is talk is cheap. And I've had conversations about things like that. And there are many retrades. So if it can't be put into a prenup, it can be put into maybe some sort of corresponding email form with your partner where there's some sort of memorialization of what you've discussed, because some people will say something when they want to say what they want you to hear, but then later when you end up on the cover of Forbes magazine and, are reported to have sold the business for $100 million, things change. People's memories change. So
Right.
if you can't have that in a prenup, which I wish you could have at least concepts in a prenup about 5 days and 2 days, Catholic and what, you can have religion in a prenup, no, you can't in a custody agreement. You can't in a prenup. It would be nice if there would be some version of the fluffier side of the prenup that included some of those concepts, because that's a gray area.
It is a gray area. And I do believe that if you are I think therapy is so important. I think communication is so important. I think if you have tools, yes, things change. I always want to work. I want all the money that each of us makes to be community property. Great. Isn't that wonderful? Now you have a kid and you're like, God, I really want to be home with the kid. So now I'm not earning any money. You are, but all your money is going to be half mine. There's a change here. There's an evolution. We have to talk about it. Let's talk about it with the help of somebody who's able to give us the tools to communicate, because you're going to feel resentful that you're the only one working. I'm going to feel resentful that I'm home and I'm with a baby all day and he doesn't speak. And what am I doing? And now I'm cleaning. Why do we need a housekeeper if you're home all day? Those are the kind of things where you can continue to grow together if you've developed those tools for communication. And again, I'm not saying it always works. Some people are dicks. Okay. They're just going to change their mind.
No, yeah.
They're not going to do what's best for you when you're on the cover of Ford. But for the most part, I think if you're in a relationship and you're in it together, if you don't just shove everything down, resent, then it eventually explodes. If you continue evolving with your partner and discussing things and communicating, you might actually stay together.
Yeah, I mean, if you had the time, you'd be a good dating advisor because what you're saying is ultimately communication. For most people, I'm stretching you with very extenuating circumstances too, because a lot of people are here for the extenuating circumstance, not the garden variety. And so we're trying to do, all of it and everything in between. I totally agree with you. And then that brings up a postnup. That brings up a postnup, which sounds like it's really just for like billionaires and their wives that supported them for 25 years. But I think a postnup isn't discussed really in the mainstream at all. So you brought up a good thing. Okay, so this one person, let's say one person supported the other person while they went to school, they got whatever they were getting, became really successful, and now it's this sort of it's my turn shift. Like, there could be a drastic shift. One person could start making a lot of money, and you're right. The other person could have to not only take care of the kids, but move to another state. And they feel like they're just the giving tree and they're giving. So where do you stand on postnups, and how common are they now, and how awkward are they? And let's talk about that topic of postnups.
They're more difficult than a prenup because you've already been married. So now obviously there's something that's changed and it has to be addressed. So how do we address it and why do we address it? I have people that come to me and say, well, he cheated on me. Now I want a postnup saying if he cheats on me again. That's not usually a good plan. It is definitely part of what I was saying in terms of the communication and the evolution of the relationship. Both with prenups and postnups, there must be full disclosure. So sometimes somebody wants a postnup because they're not getting information about the finances. I'm sure you've seen this. Usually it's people more our mom's age, but they come in and they say, we have lunch at the whatever it is in New York, the equivalent of, the Ivy or Spago here or
Yep.
whatever. I go to Neiman's and I've got my personal shopper. I can go to any hair salon, whatever in town, but I don't know what we own. I don't know what he makes. I'm not sure what our tax
Yes.
situation is. And I asked him, but he said, you don't worry about that. I make the money, or these women that are
Yes.
sneaking in the bags from, the stores because they don't want their husbands to see it. So sometimes you say, look, there's two ways I'm going to get this full disclosure, this information. One of them is I filed for divorce, and then anything I ask for, I'm going to receive in the court of law as discovery. The other, if you want to stay married, is I need full disclosure, and then I want to look at that information and work with an attorney to figure out what makes sense for me as we move forward in this relationship, if that's what you want. So we can do it this way, or we can do it this way. One way or the other, I'm getting educated because I'm no longer abdicating my financial information or responsibility in this marriage.
Yes, queen. That's a great thing. It's again back to the dum-dum model where women are running around flexing, thinking because they have cute stuff and they get to do what they want and they love that, they get the king queen mentality, but then they get left high and dry. And in those situations, a lot of times I've seen situations where the man will literally turn off the electricity at the house to mess around with them, shut off the accounts, play games. And again, the judge isn't sitting on speed dial waiting for you to call and talk to them about it. So these women are like, the faucet gets shut off, people put money elsewhere. And it's back to this being a business. It's a contract. And a woman is afraid to have a big girl conversation about something that as a business person, I would never be afraid to talk to my partner about in a business. Like, wait a second. I feel like I'm doing all the lifting here. This person is not. So we're going to have to adjust or I'm not lifting anymore. I've said that in business multiple times, but there's a situation I could think of right now where it's like, there's a disparity here. I walked into this thinking this was going to happen, but yet it's all on my back right now. And so we need to have a readjustment. And guess what? It's awkward even in business to say it as a woman or as a person, but even as a person, because I see the men too. So for me, it's awkward to bring it up, but you know what? Tough shit. I bring it up because it has to be said. It has to come out. It feels weird. It's about the delivery, not about just blurting, being prepared and figuring out how to say something. But it must be said. And you're right. It goes too far in marriage. And then that's where real resentment comes. And then also more being in the dark. And it's why a lot of men, yes, we're talking about a lot of women here. A lot of men don't want to get divorced and would sooner have affairs because it's a lot cheaper. They know what the number, they know the number, they know what the number is going to be, and they know who cares if she buys a couple of Chanel bags and she does what she wants. She has no idea what's really going on here and what I have. And the real number, if this thing goes sideways, is so much bigger.
Yep, true.
Fascinating. Okay. All right. So you have a hard stop. I'm letting you out of this. I love you. You're a badass. I like, this is like playing tennis. And I wanted you to grade me on my divorce skill, my divorce knowledge.
I think you get an A. I'm sorry to say it. I wish you didn't have to get an A, but you get an A. You've been doing this long enough, and you've also got a real person mentality of how to explain it to people that either are going through it or may be, deciding whether they want to. And you put it in really normal people terms, which I think that your listeners appreciate. So it's good. It's good. I'm all about education. I want people to be able to get as much information. Remember, 15, 20, 30 years ago, nobody was talking about divorce the way we're talking about it now. It was super taboo. Now people know it's happening, and it's because of folks like you who bring it out there and talk about it. So I think it's really, really valuable, and I appreciate what you're doing.
Okay, well, anytime, I've never said this to anyone. Anytime you're like, oh, let's talk about this, or just I'm free, I have next month, or I'm working less, or I'm on vacation, like we'll pay your rate. And I can't, but I would like to have this conversation with you more. I know you're very busy, but like just lob it into my team whenever you're available, because there'll always be more topics. I mean, we got through like 2. Like there's a whole list. I have 40 things I want to just keep talking about, and also take questions from people and then just throw them in here. So if you want to like do different things together, I think this is important too. I'm very passionate about it. They are starving for it. So whatever you want to do together here and otherwise, I'm totally down. I think you're great.
Sounds good. Thank you. Thank you for having me. I really do appreciate it.
Yeah, and we'll promote divorce.com. Whatever you want to promote also, just is there anything else you wanted to promote or mention, or
Yeah,
just
well, I wrote a
divorce.com?
book. It was in 2013, but it's still relevant, and you may want to direct people to it. It's called It Doesn't Have to Be That Way. It's on Amazon. That's another good kind of material that people can read and whatever. And it's about, like, it doesn't matter what state, it's about the fundamentals of the things you said, like wait 6 hours before responding to a text, or don't go to your attorney to talk about the new boyfriend. That's not the best use of his or her time or your money, that type of stuff.
Keep the conversation going. I really appreciate you. And I'll make sure the team does promote your book and divorce.com. I
Okay.
appreciate it so much. Thank
Thank
you.
you. Bye.
Awesome. Bye.